What's going on? Welcome to Victims and Villains. If you're new to this channel, we talk about mental health through pop culture. My name's Captain Nostalgia. Let's dig into some Bad Girl Boogey. Bad Girl Boogey tells the story of a cursed mask, and whoever wears said mask hunts down people within the LGBT community. I don't want to say that this is a really bold slasher film. I feel like this is probably one of the most daring slashers or entries into the horror genre that we've gotten here recently. This movie comes to us from writer-director Alice Maio Mackay, who you may know from her film So Vamp, which is currently streaming on Shudder from last year. First off, I want to talk just simply about Mackay as a writer and director. First off, I don't feel like there's probably anyone more qualified to tell this type of story than Mackay, and I feel like that's the reason that this movie works as well as it does. Having seen her previous work with So Vamp, which, as I mentioned before, you can currently stream right now on Shudder. It's a coming-of-age vampire story that I was not the biggest fan of, but my review last year, I stated that Mackay really has promise as a up-and-coming writer-director, and I really feel like Bad Girl Boogey is the completion of that prediction. I feel like everything that I really loved last year about So Vamp, despite some of my issues with the story, I really feel like Mackay really hones and tightens and elevates here. Whether it's its characters, its writing, its directing, some of the shots, then how they set up, the gags that they explore, and again, this is a slasher film. It's kind of different than a vampire film, so you have a little bit more creativity. But I really feel like with unleashing that creativity, Mackay really kind of lets her creativity go wild, and it's a beautiful thing to see. I really feel like the way that this movie uses homophobia and transphobia to tie into the lore of the mythos that this film is setting up about the mask and about those that have worn the mask throughout history is just such a spectacular feat for Mackay as an artist. I will say the first act of this movie is kind of a little jarring. Just to kind of give you an example, it has this self-contained story, another self-contained story, and then it gets into the meat of our plot. But those two self-contained stories kind of do have payoff later in the film's climax. But it still does kind of feel like a weird narrative decision to kind of start and have these two false starts to the overall film. But again, I really feel like that goes back to the whole idea of Mackay being a daring filmmaker and willing to try something different that you haven't really seen. And for me, I've never experienced a movie that starts out the way that Bad Girl Boogey does, and I think that's refreshing because it kind of like had me kind of puzzled until we got to the ending of the film and they were kind of explaining the portions from the beginning, and I was like, alright, I can really get behind that. The acting to bring the story to life is kind of hit or miss. I really feel like some of the acting that's in these first two segments of the film kind of feel a little bit overacted. Then you get into the bulk of the film, and the characters that we spend time with are really well acted, they're really well developed, and I found their stories really riveting. Lisa Fanto does a great job at expressing the emotion needed for this performance. I feel like Fanto's performance alone really elevates the emotional intensity that Bad Girl Boogey has to offer in terms of the emotional core of it. Fanto has some trauma that's already built up within her character, and the exploration of how Mackay explores that throughout the 80 minutes of this movie is just absolutely well done. Not only is it written well, but also Fanto is just a tremendous actress. And the other performer that I really liked in this movie, I am probably going to mispronounce their name, so if I do and you happen to see this, I apologize dearly, but Mcerlean is another tremendous addition to this cast. I feel like their performance also is a great companion alongside of Fanto's performance. The two of them just have excellent chemistry and really, you just kind of buy their friendship. And I feel like that is one of the things that I really loved most about this movie. Also, this is the first indie film I've seen in quite a long time that I want the soundtrack on vinyl. I love how punk this movie is at its core. A lot of great musicians lend their music to this, and as someone that has grown up in the scene of punk, hardcore, metalcore, and is still actively doing stuff with that scene, I really appreciate the musical choices in this movie. I know that it's not everyone's cup of tea, but I really feel like it works for this film. I know there are a couple moments within the film that the music doesn't really work. It seems like Mackay, from a creative standpoint, was really trying to highlight certain music, and thus you have a couple of unneeded musical montages within this film. But they only happen a couple times, and had the film not included them and probably just used that music elsewhere in the film, I feel like this movie's narrative would have been a little bit tighter, and some of the issues that I had with the film's narrative wouldn't be in here. I really feel like this is, in terms of it being a slasher, I really thought that the character design that they have for the killer looks really gnarly, and as a result also has some pretty gnarly gags in this movie as well. Well, let's run this through the Rorschach rating scale. I'm going to go ahead and give Bad Girl Boogey a 3.5 out of 5. I think this movie is a strong social commentary. It's a fun slasher, has great musical choices, wonderful performances, and I can't recommend this movie enough, so please go check it out. It is now available on digital. It will be available in a limited run in theaters beginning July 7th this Friday, and it will be available on DVD July 11th from Dark Star Pictures. Typically, this is the moment in the video where we talk about mental health, but as someone that is an ally to the LGBT community and not necessarily someone that belongs to it, I feel like this film does a great job at kind of exploring and expressing the mental health that comes with this. And so I just want to provide mental health resources for anyone that are in the LGBTQIA plus community. Links are going to be in the show notes below. Please check out Bad Girl Boogey, because not only is it a fun slasher, but it is also just a really valuable exploration of not only mental health, but also just a bold statement when it comes to transphobia as well as homophobia. Bad Girl Boogey is now available on digital. It will be available in select theaters this Friday, July 7th, and it will be available on DVD beginning July 11th, all from Dark Star Pictures. In the show notes below, you guys will find links to our podcast, more mental health resources, our Patreon, all of our social media, more movie reviews like this, and that subscribe button. So until next time, remember to stay classy.